Well, hello, slingers. Welcome back to another Wordslinger podcast. It's been a minute, so let's do some catching up. I'll see you on the other side.
It's the Wordslinger podcast, where story matters. Build your brand, write your book, redefine who you are. It's all about the story here. What's yours? Now, here's the guy who invented pants optional, Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger.
Wordslinger.
I am Kevin Tumlinson, the Wordslinger, the absentee Wordslinger. It's been a little while. It's been a few weeks, and that's my fault. Well, things happen. You may be aware that there was a scenario, a situation here in the Texas Hill Country a few weeks ago. Very tragic, and there were lives lost and homes lost and a great deal of flooding. So that actually happened on the 4th of July, and that did not impact our home directly or anything. So we thankfully were safe, and by the grace of God we are safe and our loved ones are safe. But it did derail some things here for us in the area for a little while. That's part of it, and then just things have gotten busy. A lot of stuff's happening. Some good things, some good news stuff. But I wanted to make sure that I recorded something today because I don't want to go too long. Get my fix, my audience fix. So anyway, recently I had a sort of dream come true, which was. For years, I have talked to all sorts of authors. If you've been following the Wordslinger podcast or any of the shows that I do, the conferences I go to, that sort of thing, I've interviewed some of the biggest names in publishing over the course of my career. But there was one person I never even asked to be on the show, and he's not on this show either. But I have always, early in my career, no. Let me backtrack that. Early in my life, in 9th grade, as a matter of fact, I picked up a book. We had testing, standardized tests, and sorry for all the wobble here. We had standardized testing happening toward, I guess, middle or end of the year, something in 9th grade. And so we were urged to go to the library and pick out a book that we could read if we happened to finish our testing early. I went to the library and, like I was prone to do, just kind of screwing around, not really picking out a book, not doing anything. And the librarian eventually kind of catches me and asks me, what are you into? What do you like to read? And I was an avid reader, but I couldn't say a genre for certain. The stuff that I'd read up till then, up till 9th grade, a lot of it was pretty juvenile. It was pretty, it's stuff you've heard of. I read a lot of like Judy Blume and, Tales of Fourth Grade Nothing. That was a favorite. I read all the Encyclopedia Brown books. But none of that stuff was age appropriate at that point in my life. And some of the books I'd read, up to then were, random. There wasn't a lot. I couldn't name anything in particular. But for some reason, I got it in my head that that science fiction was a cool genre. That's one the cool people read. So I said science fiction. And so, bless her heart, Miss Burke, our librarian, said, I got just the book for you. And she takes me over to this little turnstile thing, spins it around, and she picks out a book and hands it to me. It's a science fiction book. It's got a little ugly yellow spaceship on the front of it. A little triangular shaped spaceship flying by like a space station or something out in the galaxy somewhere. I was dubious, but I had already dug my grave, so I said, okay, I will take this book. I will check it out. I didn't have anything else picked out, so there you go. So that book was the novel Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. So I went and did my testing, and as I was prone to do, I blazed through the tests. Did well, so it wasn't unjustified momentum, but I blazed through the test. Had hours, several hours that I had to kill. So I started reading Ender's Game. I actually finished reading Ender's Game before the time was up that I had to kill. And so I just started reading it again because I was that engrossed in the story. And that started a kind of passion and love affair for the work of Orson Scott Card. And I went on to read every single thing that guy wrote. I read Speaker for the Dead immediately afterward. Xenocide came out not too long after that, and as soon as available, I got it. But I started getting my hands on anything that guy had. I picked up Songmaster, Treason. He had a collection of short stories called Maps in a Mirror. If it had his name on it, I would have bought the phone book had I found that he, found one with his name on it. But the deal was, reading that, he also would include these author notes that talked about his life and career a little. And he, at the time, did some stuff for Writer's Digest, and he wrote a couple of books that were guides for, character and viewpoint was one, how to write science fiction and fantasy. And so I picked these up because they had his name on it. But doing that kind of brought me to this realization that I'd been writing short stories and things, all my young life. And there was kind of the idea that writing was a job you could have, was work you could do, and something you could be paid for. But it hadn't quite clicked for me yet that writing fiction was something people did for a living. But he was. And because of him, I discovered other writers, and I discovered other people referencing how you make a living as a writer. All of that funneled into me deciding that being a novelist was what I wanted to do. And I kind of veered in and off, in and out of that path, off and on that path for quite a while until my 30s. I wrote short stories. I worked on books and things, but I never quite, finished it until much later. And I had a whole contract and everything that fell apart, but I wasn't as dedicated to it until much later. But I was still, I knew that was the thing. I was lazy about it, and thank God I've outgrown that. And I'm much more disciplined now. And I get increasingly more disciplined about this craft and business as I get older. But fast forward a little, and there were all these veers and turns in my life and career where I would do anything but the writing because I wanted to get to a point where I could do the writing. It was crazy. And if you were stuck in this sort of thinking, I sympathize, and I want to advise you, just go do the thing that you're putting off. And what I mean by this is I would get into other work. I became an engineer for a while. I eventually got into radio and TV, and I got into all these other things. And it was always, this is something I'm going to do because this can earn money. And when I've earned enough money, or I've gotten to a point where I can retire from this, then I can write. I can write books. If I had just spent all that same time and energy, you got to do what you got to do to survive. But if I had spent that same time and energy actually writing, books and short stories and positioning myself as an author and selling that work and establishing myself in the industry, I'd be so far ahead of where I am now. So somewhere along the way, though, I got into radio first, and I started interviewing people on radio, one of whom was Dan Brown, who had written a book called Digital Fortress. I was a producer and an occasional sub-in host for Tom King's CompuTalk, which was a nationally syndicated, top-rated, the number one rated computer-oriented talk radio show. Kim Commando was our chief competitor, and she was number 2. So we were doing pretty good. But I ended up interviewing and chatting with a young fellow named Dan Brown. And he had written a book called Digital Fortress, which was in our bailiwick, so we were talking about that. But he had mentioned that he was having some trouble with his computer. He was thinking about getting a new one. He thought about building one. And I said, well, let me help you out. The radio show, because we were a computer talk radio show, I had lots of parts. And we would get free things, video cards, CPUs, all kinds of stuff for free. So I said, let me just send you a bunch of this stuff, and then we'll get on the phone, and I'll talk you through putting it together. And we did that. Well, if you look in the acknowledgments for Angels and Demons, which was the first Robert Langdon book, he thanks Tom King's CompuTalk for helping him at that point in his life when he was writing that book. I don't get mentioned by name, which I resent, and now he doesn't know who I am and won't return my phone calls, even when I reach out via J.D. Barker, who does know him. So, but that's life for you. Life moves fast. So, fast forward from there. He was one of the first. He became big, of course, for Da Vinci Code, the second Robert Langdon book. And, it sort of established a pattern for me. I interviewed a lot of people over the years for radio and then TV and then for the podcasts. And I've talked to some big names, huge names in the publishing industry, some of the biggest and never made me all that nervous. I can hold my own. I've shared a microphone with Kevin Smith and others, and it's just not a big deal to me. But there was one person whom I never could make myself reach out to interview and to even attempt to interview, and that was Orson Scott Card. And for no other reason than they say, never meet your heroes. I have had so many people that I looked up to and respected in various industries, novelists and actors and politicians that I at first really admired, and then they just showed their true colors and really let me down, and so I was disappointed. And I did not want that to happen with Orson Scott Card, and I know that there was some controversy around his views back when the Ender's Game film came out. I feel that's pretty unfair because his views are informed entirely by his faith. And so what they're really criticizing is his faith. It's almost like, I don't want to get off in the weeds here, but I mean, your faith is such a vital part of your life. You're not going to just turn on it. I mean, think about the things that you find part of your core belief. If someone came along and criticized those because they felt that it was immoral or unethical or something, and you just don't share their point of view, but you're also not viciously attacking or avenging yourself on them for coming after you. That's the way it seemed to me. So whatever you may think, whatever your beliefs are, I understand. I got my own take on things, and it's probably controversial, but my feeling is this: life is life, people are people. I am commanded to love people no matter who they are, what they do, who they spend their time with. Whether I agree with their lifestyle or not, I'm still commanded to love them. And that is just the way I try to operate. And if I get canceled for loving people, then that's worth it. But so let's just skip ahead. I never wanted to reach out to Orson Scott Card because I was always afraid of fracturing that, respect I had for him. I was always afraid that, I would talk to him and it would turn out he wasn't a great guy, and, something was really off or whatever. And so, I was always worried about that. And it should not have been, because what ended up happening was my good friend J.D. Barker. He and I co-host Writers Inc. together, the Writers Inc. podcast with Christine and Jenna. And on air one day, we were talking about, the books and authors that influenced us most. And I brought up Orson Scott Card, and I said, I read Ender's Game, and then I read everything this guy wrote, and there's probably no greater influence. I can tell you with absolute certainty that there is no greater influence on my voice and approach to writing than Orson Scott Card. JD had Ender's Game as an audiobook, but he had never read it or listened to it. And so he decided to give it a shot. And over the next couple of weeks, he listened to it and really enjoyed it. And then on his own initiative, out of the blue, reached out at the Hat Rack, I think it's hatrackriver.com. That's Orson Scott Card's official domain name, his official website. Reached out to ask if Card wanted to be on the Writers Inc. podcast. And through a series of emails back and forth and negotiations, he agreed to. And so JD reaches out and says, I don't suppose you'd care to interview Orson Scott Card. And I'm like, well, I could be persuaded. And so, thanks to my dear friend JD Barker, I got an opportunity to talk to the person that I think you could, in many respects, blame my entire writing career on. Blame or praise for my entire writing career. If you like my work, you have Orson Scott Card to thank. In many, many ways, he was a literary spiritual father to me in my writing. And I probably don't do him justice with a lot of my earliest work. I think that my work now is starting to kind of shape up into something that I think is worthy. But everything I wrote, if you are a reader that loved my stuff, then you have Orson Scott Card to thank for its existence, honestly. So having this opportunity to kind of sit and chat with him, I don't get nervous about interviews. I don't get nervous. This microphone and we are partners in crime, and there's just I don't have a problem sitting and talking to literally anyone. There is no one on the planet that can intimidate me in an interview. If we're all operating in good faith. I mean, if we, people can surprise attack you, but I've never had that happen. But on the couple of weeks leading up to this interview, it definitely was in my head. I was definitely anticipating it. The night before the actual interview, I had a dream toward the end of the evening, toward morning before I woke up. I dreamt that I looked at the clock and it was 30 minutes after I was supposed to be interviewing him, and I panicked. And in the dream, I'm trying to kind of reach out, and apologize, and set it up, make sure we're good. And then I woke up, and I realized, okay, I am nervous about this interview. I'm anticipating it in a way that I just don't anticipate things like this anymore. I don't get that anymore. I don't get, the jitters or stage fright or I think I do. I will pee 100 times before I go on stage at a conference and speak, or before I even get in front of this microphone to do an interview or something. I get that sort of nervous bladder thing, and it's not dire. If I don't go to the bathroom, I'm not going to wet myself on air or something. But we all express our nerves in different ways, but I just don't. I just did not get that kind of nervous about these things anymore. So I could tell this was important to me. It's kind of a given that it would be. Intellectually, you know when something is big, but I could tell this was a watershed moment for me in one way or another, and I was determined that no matter how it went, I was going to be respectful, and I was going to honor him, and I prayed that it would go good, that it would go well, we'll say. So when the interview came around, I connected via Zoom, and he was already in the little Zoom room. It's pretty rare that people get in there ahead of me. I have a rule. I have a 2-minute rule. Like when it's 2 minutes ahead of the connect time, I'm in there. And he was already sitting there. Usually I have to wait a minute or so. But he was already there. We chatted for about 30 minutes, and I could already tell we were connecting. I already loved the guy. So my fears of, the whole never meet your heroes thing turned out to be unfounded. And then we did the interview, and he was wonderful in the interview. And he said something at the end of the interview about me and my writing, because he decided he would pick up the Coelho medallion, because he speaks Portuguese. He spent time in as a missionary in like Brazil and places, or Portugal. I don't know. I'm sorry, Scott, if you're listening. I may have mucked that up. He spent time in his missionary work working among those who speak Portuguese, we'll say, and so he recognized the name Coelho. I probably pronounced it incorrectly too. And so he picked that one up and read the first opening chapter. And he said something at the end of the interview that you're going to have to wait to hear. But he said something so complimentary to me, and it just shook me to hear, because when you have read the work of someone as much as I have with Scott Card, every book that he's published, every one, the shelves behind me, you can only see, if you're watching on YouTube, all the books that are up there, and this is not all of them that I own, but every book up there is an Orson Scott Card book, right down to the bottom, and there's more on the bookcase over here, and some of his nonfiction is in the bookcase directly behind me. So, and that's not every book I own, because I own a ton of ebooks now. I had paperbacks, but when we got on the road in the van, I decided to sell the paperbacks. I wish I hadn't. So I'm going to actually start slowly, when I find them in used bookstores, repurchasing all the old paperbacks, because I miss them. I miss those covers. I should never let them go. But I've got them all as digital books, and I'm okay with that too. But at any rate, I have read everything the guy's written, whether it was sci-fi or whether it was, he's got some books that are sort of more in the religious fiction genre, more of a historical fiction kind of thing. His Women of Genesis books and things like that. Saints. I remember when I read Saints, that was a departure for me in terms of the kind of fiction I was reading, because it was in no way the kind of book that I would have picked up and read otherwise. But I read it because he wrote it. You can't spend that much time reading that many volumes of work, that many words from an author, without them getting in your head and without you getting, sort of a replica of that author in your head, in your heart, in your soul. So there's a definite connection there. And what I noticed when he and I were talking was just how much we clicked and resonated. And I think that's why. Because I'm more than a fan of the work. I was a devotee, basically. I was an acolyte. I was learning from him as we went along, learning from his voice. I remember early days of my own writing. I remember handing a short story. I was working on something with a friend. He wanted to be a writer. I had been doing some writing. I hadn't yet published. We co-authored a piece together, and I handed him the stuff I wrote for my contribution to our little co-authored thing we were doing. And he read it, and he actually commented that he could absolutely hear Orson Scott Card's voice in what I had written. He just saw it. Unprompted, he said this. So he just said it just felt like something Card wrote. And that was a great honor to me. Now, you never want to just flat out imitate someone for your career. You know, we do that to learn. That's just the nature of how we learn anything. We imitate. We watch our parents walk, and so we want to imitate what they're doing, and so we learn the skill of walking, and we hear them speak, and so we learn the skill of speaking, and we say the things that they say, which is why it's important. The way you speak to your child is very important because they're learning from you the whole time. And the same thing with anything. We're imitative creatures. We learn by imitation. And so it's the same for the softer side of arts. You know, you can learn writing. You can learn how to shape a letter with with a pencil or a pen, or how to type on a keyboard. You know, these are mechanical things that we learn mostly through repetition and practice. But the same applies to the softer arts, like tone and voice and pacing. I grew up reading a ton of comic books. I grew up reading, Judy Blume novels and Encyclopedia Brown. You see all that stuff. You can see the influence of all that in my writing now. But nothing and no one had as much influence over my voice as a writer as Orson Scott Card. After the interview, we talked for a good hour and a half. He wanted to keep talking, and I wanted to keep talking, and so I let him say whatever he wanted, and then I said some things, and then we just sort of bonded on that call. And it left with an invitation from both sides to continue this conversation anytime. And so he and I we're planning to chat again here soon. And it's just meaningful to me in a way I can't really express. I spent years, I would write this guy letters. I remember early on, I was still in high school, I had a Canon Typestar 110 typewriter that my grandmother bought me from Sam's Club. And I remember writing a letter to him to an address that was in the back of one of his books, I think in the back of one of his nonfiction books. And I can't remember exactly what I wrote, but I mean, I'm sure I gushed, and there was probably tons of, misspelled words and typos, but it was typed up. And I actually, at the end, because in this era, a lot of writers would put a little note at the end of their book saying, written on a Amiga 1000 using WordStar. They would for some reason call out the technology they used to write the book or write the note. It was a thing. So I wrote at the end of my note, written on a Canon Typestar 110 typewriter. And I sent that to him. Later, when the internet became a thing, and I had like many people, had discs that allowed me to connect to America Online. I would use every free minute I could get to get on that service, because it was, I think, all the contact numbers were long distance for me. So anytime I could, I tried to get on. But he had a web ring, or whatever you want to call the sites that were part of AOL at the time, called Hatrack River. It was a Hatrack River community. Later, he would turn that into his website on the internet. But at that time, there were those of us we would pop in, we would have conversations and interact with each other. And at one point there was a call for short stories, and I sent in a short story. And it just, I don't know. I was always trying to find a way to connect with the guy, and failing usually. And sometimes I would connect and it would go south. Like I would come across like a jerk when I wasn't really trying to, but things happen. And I've gone through stages of development in my life that have changed who I am. So I was a different person when trying to connect at that era than I am now. But to come to this point where I finally got to meet and chat with him and get to know him a little better and form some kind of relationship with him. And I think it will continue on. I hope it does. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'm actually, I want this to be something very reciprocal. Like I want him to feel like he gets something out of knowing me, he not transactional, but, an actual relationship. I want that because I grew up without a father. Didn't meet my real father, my birth father, I guess, until I was 38 years old. All the people who kind of filled the role in my life sort of came in and out. I had a stepdad, that was a great guy, but we, to sum up our relationship, on the day that they told us they were getting a divorce, my mom takes my brother and leaves and goes, to my grandparents' home, which was across the field from where we were living. And, I'm just supposed to bring my bike. I'm supposed to ride my bike there. And, my stepdad kind of sets me down for a second and says, I know we never got along. And I don't think any other phrase I've ever had said to me has crushed me quite like that one. At like 8 years old, this was my dad. I remembered when he came into our lives, so I knew he wasn't, at some level I knew he was not my real father, but I'd never met my real father. And so to tell me that we never got along was news to me. And obviously I've always remembered it. And so there were other male role models and things in my life that came and went. Most went. And so there's a part of me that's always cast about to try to find that figure who could influence my character in ways that I found agreeable, in ways that I found, spiritual and profound. And the work of Orson Scott Card was probably the closest I ever had to that in my life. And the reason I never reached out was because I didn't want to blow that. So here we are. He's 73 and I am 52. So there's a 21-year gap between us. And that's about appropriate for that kind of relationship. But I don't know if he fully appreciated what I was saying about how much of an influence he had. I'm sure he gets that a lot from young writers and from younger than me maybe. So I'm sure he's heard that sort of thing. But I just don't believe that anyone else could possibly have had the kind of profound sort of kinship that I had with him through his work. So all that to say, let's circle up and let's talk about this from a me and you perspective now. You have no idea the kind of impact you might have on someone else with what you create and what you do in the world. You have no idea what their spiritual and emotional needs may be. And so we owe it to ourselves, but we owe it to them. And my belief is we owe it to God to serve through the work that we do. And as a storyteller, I feel that's my mission. That's my purpose in life, is to tell stories that, if you look on my website, this is my mission statement: to inform and inspire, to educate and entertain. And those are the four tenets of my work. Those are the four tent poles, if you will, that hold up my whole life and career. And no matter what I accomplish, no matter what my level of success is or is not, my purpose is to tell stories that shape the person reading them in a positive way. I like to say that I write fast-paced, hopeful fiction. I like to say that I don't know. I if my work can influence someone, even in a fractional degree, the way Orson Scott Card's work influenced me, then I am a success. Though I die impoverished, I am a success. No matter what else happens in my life, that will be my glory in the kingdom of God. So, the podcasts, the books, the Substack posts, whatever it is I'm creating, that is that's the end game. Is I hope that some word that I utter or write has that kind of impact on somebody, even to some marginal fractional degree. And to that end, Scott Card, if you are listening, I cannot thank you enough for who you are and what you've done and the impact you've had on my life and career. God bless you. For those of you watching or listening, thank you for tuning in to another Wordslinger podcast. I hope that this was something informative, educational, inspirational, entertaining. I hope it blessed you in some way. I hope it continues to bless you. Please like, share, subscribe, all the things that we of the digital landscape need in order to continue our existence. Share this with people you care about and love, and that's going to do it for this week's Wordslinger podcast. God bless you. Prayers to those who were impacted by flooding, not just in Texas, but in, I believe, Nevada and other places, or was it Arkansas? I can't remember. I'm very sorry that I'm not specifically remembering, but for those impacted by flooding and other disasters, God bless you. My prayers are with you. Hope you are well, and my great love to you, and I'll see you next time.
Wordslinger.